You're listening to the Sales Chameleon Podcast. Smarter sales, stronger growth, simplified.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Sales Chameleon Podcast, where selling smarter starts. I'm your host, Heather Coggins, and today I'm going to be diving into a challenging but super important topic, and that's how to navigate conversations when someone is in what we call backup mode, and then what to do if they're just not willing to meet you halfway. Okay, and so if you've ever had a conversation where the other person just wasn't budging, where logic, rapport building, or even high energy enthusiasm, no matter what you did, it just seemed to bounce right off of them, you've likely encountered someone that's in their backup mode. And so this episode is going to be all about recognizing those behaviors, understanding what's going on under the surface, and then learning how to really manage those situations effectively. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so what is backup mode and why does it happen? And I want to start off with the basics, okay? So when someone is in backup mode, it's going to typically tend to mean that they're under stress, they're feeling triggered in some sort of way, okay? So this can come from a multitude of different things. It can come from pressure, conflict. It can even come from a simple misalignment in communication styles. And so essentially, they are now acting in a defensive state. And this is where their social style becomes even more pronounced, okay? So the fascinating thing about backup mode is that it often follows this thing that's known as a Z pattern. And so here's what that's going to look like for each of the different social styles. So for drivers, they are going to double down on control, okay? So they may become more forceful, they may become even more abrupt, and then in some cases, they may become domineering. Expressives are going to shift straight into attack mode. And so they're going to use emotions and exaggeration to really make their point loud and clear. While amiables are going to tend to retreat. They're going to, avoid confrontation altogether. So they're going to withdraw. They'll say, yep, everything is fine, and just hope the storm passes. And then your analyticals, they get hypercritical. So they're going to fixate on the data. They're going to nitpick, and sometimes they're going to seem overly rigid because they're really seeking to, try and regain that clarity and certainty. Now, that's just where each of those people start, okay? They tend to end up, if they complete the full Z pattern, so if the problem persists and they completely go through the full Z pattern, they're going to actually end up exhibiting behaviors of the opposite social style to where they originally started. So a driver in full backup mode is going to end up in the amiable quadrant. And so with these Z patterns, the Z pattern happens because the natural tendencies of that primary social style ends up intensifying under stress. Okay, and so, just sticking with the driver example, drivers who already value control, they're going to end up becoming hyper focused on maintaining it when things feel shaky. But if it keeps persisting, they're going to eventually just retreat, avoid the confrontation altogether. They're going to go on to something else, and focus their attention there. And so if we look at managing these social styles in backup mode, how do you handle someone that's in backup mode without escalating things further? And so the key is really to recognizing the behavior, understanding what those triggers are, and then adjusting your approach to be able to bring them back to the center, kind of wrangle them back into some normalcy. And so the way you can manage each of the different social styles is, let's just start with our drivers, since we were kind of already talking about them. So with drivers, to manage their style, what you want to do is match their need for control, but without challenging it directly, okay? So you want to become more concise and solution focused. You want to acknowledge their frustration and offer a clear path forward, okay? So if a driver says, why is this taking so long? You're going to want to respond with something along the lines of, hey, I understand the urgency. Here's what I'm doing to get us back on track, okay? Now with expressives, what you're going to want to do is really acknowledge their emotions and redirect their energy towards solutions. So they really need to feel like they're heard, they need to feel validated, especially before they feel like they can refocus their energy on the task at hand, okay? And so if you have an expressive that just responds with, oh my God, this is just a complete disaster, instead of getting defensive and escalating that further, respond with something along the lines of, hey, I can totally see how frustrating this is. Let's explore how we can turn it around, okay? With them, you're going to want to acknowledge those feelings, really listen, and then share through empathy as you're working towards kind of that problem-solving piece of it. Now, when we get into our amiables, with them, what you're going to want to do is really create a safe space and invite them to share their concerns and really reassure them that, conflict is okay and that you're here to collaborate. They don't want to feel like there's going to be any kind of negative impact against them or within the relationship if, the conflict is addressed. And so, reassure them that, hey, it's okay. I'm here to work together on this with you. And if you have, an amiable that says, it's fine, don't worry about it, because they'll probably say something along those lines. They tend to make those passive aggressive statements, specifically when they're in backup mode. You're probably going to want to respond, somewhere along the lines of, I feel like there might be more on your mind. Let's figure this out together, okay? You're sharing through that empathy to wrangle them back in, and then when they start sharing, you then want to listen actively and intently. And same goes with our analyticals. So with them, you want to give them data, you want to give them clarity and time to process, because they're going to need that logical reassurance as well as a clear roadmap to really regain confidence. But similarly to amiables, as I just mentioned, if you've got an analytical that says, hey, this just doesn't make sense, respond with, hey, I understand. Let's break this down together to make sure all the details are clear. So you're responding by, first sharing through empathy and then giving them the floor to, express their concerns so that you can then listen intently and work collaboratively on, the right result or the right solution. And so what happens when the person that you're working with or speaking to, whether that's in a work setting or in a personal setting, what happens when they refuse to play ball, right? That's when we kind of get into some of those tougher situations, when the other person just isn't willing to meet you halfway. And so let's just say you've done everything right up until this point. You've done everything you can to adapt to their style, but they're just stuck in backup mode and they will not budge. What do you do at that point? So I'm going to give you a framework to help guide you. And that framework's going to start with essentially just acknowledging that you're at an impasse, okay? It's okay to call out the tension, but you want to do it gently and professionally. And so, for example, you can say something along the lines of, hey, it seems like we're just not quite on the same page. Do you mind if we just take a moment to step back and reassess? Second, you're going to want to focus on the goals. So you want to bring the conversation back to those shared objectives. You want to avoid all of that emotion or that subjectivity and really remind them of the bigger picture, okay? That could sound something like, hey, ultimately, we both want the same outcome here. So let's just figure out how we can get there together in the most effective way, right? You're also going to want to set boundaries. So if the person is just truly unwilling to collaborate, it's okay to set limits. In fact, in a lot of cases at that point, it's necessary. And so, for example, something like that might sound like, hey, I want to make sure we're moving forward productively. So if now isn't the best time, let's just find another time to regroup when we're ready to find a solution. Okay. And then know when to walk away. So there are going to be some rare cases where it just may be necessary to either pause the conversation, involve a neutral third party, or even just terminate the relationship completely, okay? If someone's resistance is becoming a roadblock and there's just no path forward, stepping away is going to most likely be the best chance in preventing that further escalation. And so if we take all of this and start bringing it all together, I want to end this with some key takeaways, okay? And the first starts with remembering that backup mode is a stress response. It's not a personal attack. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You want to take things professionally, not personally, okay? And I'll be honest, a lot of this comes from, can come from some other psychological factors like, maybe experiences that they've been through in the past that have, emotionally affected them in a certain way. And so keep that in mind, take it professionally, not personally, and recognizing it is really the first step to being able to manage it. Next, you want to remember to use empathy and adaptability to really bring the person back to center and wrangle them back in, right? So match their energy, but stay grounded and do it in an empathetic way. And then when collaboration feels impossible, make sure you're focusing on shared goals, you're setting those boundaries, and you know when to pause the conversation or even terminate the relationship when it's necessary, okay? Because the reality is you can't control how others respond, but you can definitely control how you adapt. And so in most cases, that's going to make all the difference. But in very rare cases, nothing you do is going to work, and it's okay to, at that point, pause the conversation or terminate the relationship. All right. And so as your, actionable takeaway item this week, what I want you to do is think about a recent challenging conversation you've had. And then go ahead and reflect on, the other person's social style and consider how you handled the behavior in the moment. So if they were in backup mode, how might you adjust your approach next time, especially if it didn't end favorably, okay? But that's going to do it for today's episode. Remember, adaptability isn't about changing who you are. It's about meeting others where they are. And so if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss a chance to grow your sales game. Until next time, keep selling smarter, stay versatile, embrace your inner chameleon, and I will catch you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Sales Chameleon Podcast.